Now, I'd like to welcome our next guest to Good Morning Sunday, journalist and poet John Paul Flintoff, whose books cover a wide range of subjects, from sewing your own clothes, making adequate speeches and changing the world. His new book is a collection of poetry called Psalms for the City, which reimagines the Book of Psalms for our social media-soaked culture in his journey into the healing soul. I'm delighted to say that John Paul joins us now. Good morning. Welcome to Good Morning Sunday.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good
very
morning.
much for having me.
You're so welcome. So tell us about this psalm writing. I mean, you call it a form of spiritual journaling. So tell us about that relationship with the Book of Psalms and how the book came about.
Okay, thank you. So I wasn't brought up religious, but I did go to a school where we sang hymns every day, and I guess that sank in for. I'll come back to that in a bit. But I had a breakdown at the end of 2017, went into psychiatric hospital for a long time, really felt absolutely at the bottom of the bottom, felt entirely worthless, nothing to look forward to in life. All the things that one might feel when going into psychiatric hospital. It was as awful as I feared, but I wouldn't wish it away. It was great to learn about myself and to know that I could recover from it. And one of the things that my psychiatrist told me was to get lots of exercise because she said it will be better than all the therapy and all the medication put together. So I took her at her word. Didn't belong to a gym, so I walked around like I didn't have anything else to do. And quite honestly, I didn't have much else to do. So I walked all over the place in the city where I live, which is London. And also, a friend of mine who's a psychotherapist said that after my sessions, I should take the time to let them sink in somewhere. And it just happened that next to my therapist was one of the most beautiful churches in London. It was decorated by the Pre-Raphaelites. So I'd just go in there, not know what to do, have the usual fear that I was going to do it wrong, probably offend someone, or I was going to be pounced on by someone who was going to try and, make me do something that I didn't want to do. But I was just left alone. And when I was spoken to, it was really nicely. And so I looked at the things in the church, really beautiful pictures. It reminded me of some of those hymns that I sang as a child. I remembered the stories, the kindness I was treated with. I started to be interested, just naturally became interested. And I flicked through the Bibles that I found in churches. And one of the things that I kept coming back to was the Psalms, because in the Psalms, King David, who wrote them as things to be sung or played to music, he would download whatever was on his mind. And sometimes he wanted his enemies to be smited. And sometimes, like the next line or a few verses later, he'd be saying how ecstatic he was about everything and thank you, God, for making him. So I thought that was really interesting. And I thought it was also a wonderful model for what I was being taught to do as a man in my 50s, understand how I'm feeling, say how I'm feeling, be open and honest, not necessarily spilling it all out everywhere, but being able to find a place to name those things. So I thought that was a great model, and I thought I'd write my own.
And how's your health now?
Oh, I'm really tip-top, thank you very much. In as much as I do have moments when I feel quite panicky or miserable, but I know that they'll pass, and that's the big difference.
And in terms of the Psalms and the city, what have these got to do with the places where we live?
Well, because I was walking around everywhere and having quite a lot of kind of revelatory thoughts about who I am, where I am, what I've been through, what I've enjoyed, what has been difficult. They were very spatially related. It depended on where I'd been. So I'd sort of connect something with a place. And so when I was writing, I would carry my notebook around, and I would both write poems and draw the pictures which are now in the book. And so sometimes the picture is the reminder of the place, and sometimes the poem is. And that's how I felt like actually being able to stare at a place and think about it by drawing, because you have to really take a moment when you're drawing. I was able to ground myself and feel some of those feelings. And what I have learned as a writer thank you for mentioning some of my other books, is that when we write about someone else's experience or we hear about someone else's experience, we tend to have a part of that experience. So I'll never forget watching Tom Cruise on the top of a tall building in Dubai in one of the Mission Impossible films and noticing in the cinema that my own hands were sweating. So if I share my experience, I hope that someone else might somewhat feel my experience and see that it's going to be all right.
Because you've made yourself really vulnerable here. You know, there's a real vulnerability and, you know, a sense of making yourself vulnerable in order to help others. And that's quite a clear intention. I know Jason would love the illustrations in the book. It's a beautiful looking book, isn't
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Kate, you know, you took the words right out of my mouth there, because I was about to say, John Paul, when we got the book, the first thing I said to Kate was, such a beautiful looking book too.
Oh, thank you so much. That means so much to me, because I'll tell you, one of the things that it feels difficult to talk about this stuff without falling into dreadful cliches, but it does feel like a kind of a rebirth. And I said when I was in hospital, I felt like there was nothing to look forward to. I had always wanted to be an artist before I was a writer, and a teacher put me off. And now here I am with a book of poetry that I illustrated myself. And I am now in some way an artist. It just feels like I did it.
It must feel great to look back down the mountain and to just take a minute to go, oh, look how far we've come. You know, when you turn around halfway up the mountain, you look at how far that path has been. It must feel wonderful for you.
It really does. I feel really, really blessed. I can't actually think of a better word than that. So,
yeah. And John Paul, just one final note. And we often say this on Good Morning Sunday because we're very proud of the show that we have here. And we are one big family. And I often say this, that your contribution may just help someone listening this morning. And given that you have spoken about your vulnerabilities as well, what advice would you have for somebody who's waking up this morning, maybe not having a great day?
It took me 6 months to admit quite how bad it was, where I was actually, without any intention of doing anything, I was really wishing that I wasn't alive. And for 6 months to hold that thought, it's incredibly painful. And it wasn't as painful as the prospect of telling someone, which felt like the most excruciating thing. But when I did it, I felt better. And if you can't bring yourself to tell anyone who's close to you, really do phone Samaritans. Or tell someone who doesn't even know you, and they'll find some help. You've just got to tell someone what you're struggling with, and it will be really hard to do that. But once you do, it will feel better.
Well, thank you so much for those words, and thank you for the gift of the book that's out now. It's a lovely read, and it's a beautiful looking thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, if you've been listening to this and you want the BBC Action Line, then that is always there for you, bbc.co.uk/action line. John Paul Flintoff, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Really lovely to have you. Thank you. Have a lovely day. God bless.
And you. Bye.